The first time Jonas saw the sky bleed, he was 8 years old. He remembered it clearly, not because it was a day everything changed, but because his mother had lied to him. "That's just how sunsets look sometimes," she'd said, pressing his face into her coat to shield him from the ash that drifted like snow. Like fire and honey. But fire had a smell, and honey didn't fall in flakes. He had learned, young, that the sky wasn't supposed to crack. Years later, the memory came back to him often. It visited in quiet moments, in the whir of solar fans trying to keep the heat from baking inside of the dome, in the silence of abandoned fields that once hummed with bees, in the way people avoided mirrors, not out of superstition, but because they couldn't stand to look themselves in the eye anymore. Jonas lived in Settlement 13, a patch of artificial life stitched into the ruined fabric of old Texas. What hadn't been swallowed by sandstorms was scorched by ultraviolet waves. There were trees, plastic ones, sprinkled near the center to give children some idea of what forests had once been. And there were people, fewer every month. He worked for the Census Bureau, not because he cared about numbers, but because it let him go outside the fences. It was one of the few jobs that came with freedom, or at least the illusion of it. Today, he was heading north of the settlement to check on a silent sector, Block A7, an old biotech farm that had gone dark. No data, no comms, no scheduled returns. Technically, it was under quarantine due to biohazard risk, but Jonas had learned early on that biohazard just meant no one wants to see what's left. His partner, Mara, drove. She was lean, sharp-eyed, always chewing a stim tab. She didn't talk unless she had to, which Jonas appreciated. He wasn't good with conversation anymore. They arrived just after noon. The place looked dead. Not decayed. No vines, no animals, no sign of weather damage. Just still. Jonas hated that kind of silence. It had weight. "Nothing on thermal," Mara said, peering at her tablet. "No residual heat signatures. You sure this is worth logging? If it's quiet, we tag it. If it's clean, we mark it habitable. If it's not," he trailed off. "If it wasn't, it went in a different file. A black one." The facility had once produced gene-modified crops resistant to ashfall. Ash wheat. They called it bread for the new world. But then came the spores. The ones that bloomed in lungs and rewrote DNA. People started calling them breathers. Jonas didn't know if that's what happened here, but he didn't like how the air tasted. Metallic. Wrong. Inside, they found evidence of a quick evacuation. Half-eaten meals. Power still trickling through motionless screens. On one desk, a photo of a family, a woman and 2 children, sat beside a cracked mug. The dust was undisturbed. No sign of violence, but no sign of escape either. Mara pointed toward a terminal. Still active. Jonas logged in with a general access code. The screen flickered, then loaded a surveillance log. Log 087. Patient still showing signs of cooperative behavior. Skin calcification spreading. Speech patterns more fragmented. Log 088. Security breach last night. Unknown entry. No data corruption detected, but specimen containment breached. Log 089. File corrupted. Jonas leaned closer. This wasn't just a farm. "It never is," Mara said flatly. "In one of the labs, they found it. A wall of glass, long since fractured, with a stain along the floor that looked too thick to be old blood. Next to it, restraints. Medical. Human-sized. I'm calling it," Jonas said. "We marked this one dark." But as he turned, he noticed something. On the far wall, behind peeling lab posters and faded hazard signs, someone had written a message in dark ink. "We were wrong. IT didn't come from US." Mara saw it too. Her jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but I don't think this place is as dead as it looks." They didn't speak much on the way back. When Jonas returned to his quarters, he tried to file the report as usual, but the interface rejected it. Access denied. Classification level increased. That never happened. His clearance wasn't top tier, but it wasn't low either. He sent a ping to admin. No reply. He tried again. Then his screen blinked once, then went black. That night, the sky bled again. This time, no one pretended it was just the sunset. Jonas stood outside the dome, watching as the red streaks curved unnaturally across the horizon, like veins pumping something thick and alive into the sky. The air buzzed faintly, as if something enormous was charging far beyond the clouds. And deep in his gut, Jonas knew whatever had happened at Block A7 hadn't ended. It had begun. He turned, walking back toward the dome. Lights inside flickered. A low alarm pulsed. It wasn't a drill. He didn't run. Whatever was coming, it wasn't rushing. It had waited this long. It could wait a little longer. 3 days after the sky bled, people stopped sleeping. Not all at once. Not dramatically. At first, it was dismissed as stress. A few restless nights. Bad dreams. Jonas hadn't slept more than 4 hours himself, but he chalked it up to the report he couldn't file, the unanswered messages, the flickering lights in the dome. Then children began to cry without knowing why. Not tantrums, not fear, just long, hollow wails that seemed pulled from somewhere too deep for language. Power grids fluctuated more than usual. Water ran cloudy for hours at a time. Birds, what few synthetic or real ones remained, stopped mimicking their program calls. They just sat, staring at walls. Jonas watched it all unfold from within. Everyone pretended it wasn't happening. That's how humans coped, pretending. Even the elders, who remembered the early collapses, clung to habit. Ration cues, dome maintenance, ritual reporting. But it felt like rehearsing for a show that had already been canceled. He tried contacting Mara. She didn't respond. Her comms profile vanished from the system entirely. No record of her transfer or reassignment. Just gone. That night, he returned to the northern fence, despite protocol. He needed to see Block A7 again, not the place, but the direction. The sky was normal. No crimson tears. No hums. Just black, speckled with hollow stars. He waited for a sign. Instead, the sign came in the form of motion. A figure, alone, emerged from the distant edge of the ash fields. It moved slowly, like walking through water. Jonas instinctively reached for his scanner, but the device shorted out the moment he powered it on. He felt it in his teeth, like static. The figure came closer, and something in Jonas screamed at him to run. But he didn't. It wasn't fear that pinned him. It was curiosity, sharpened into something painful. The figure, now within 100 yards, wore what looked like tattered technician gear. Its gait was uneven, like its bones didn't match the rhythm of the body. One leg dragged, the other bent wrong, but it kept coming. And then it stopped. Jonas didn't blink. Couldn't. His body felt caught in some field, the kind he'd only read about in fringe quantum reports. He looked at the face. No, not a face, just the echo of one. Vague, shifting, as though the memory of whoever it used to be was malfunctioning, like a corrupted photograph constantly rewriting itself. The figure opened its mouth. No sound came out, but Jonas heard it anyway. Inside, we remember what you forgot. It wasn't a voice. It was a presence, collective, wounded, infinite, and then it collapsed. Jonas staggered forward. The pull broke. He rushed the crumpled figure, now twitching lightly in the dust. There was a scent, burned ozone, rotting fruit. Up close, he could see that the skin was stretched in patterns. Not scars, not infections. Designs, glyphs. He reached for his scanner again, but it buzzed and died. So he just stared. Then the eyes opened. They weren't human, but they had been. What stared back wasn't hate. It was remorse. And something deeper. Recognition. You left it open. The thing rasped, voice broken and wet. You let it look. Jonas stepped back. What do we let look? The thing smiled. Not cruelly, more like a parent realizing a child had touched something forbidden. We didn't bring it. It whispered. We only found it. It convulsed once more, then stopped breathing. If it ever had. Jonas didn't return to the dome that night. He buried the figure in the ash, marking the spot with rusted ration tin. As he stood, he looked back toward the west, toward the unseen horizon where Block A7 had been swallowed, and felt the wind shift. The next day, The dome trembled, not visibly, not structurally, but everything inside began to bend in ways that weren't physical. Clocks slowed, but only for certain people. Sectors flickered in and out of power. One entire residential block woke up unable to speak their native language, and people started drawing. Not art, symbols, over and over, glyphs no one had taught them. Children carved them into the plastic trees. Engineers found them etched into their own forearms when they pulled back their sleeves. Even Jonas found one on his mirror, drawn in condensation, though he hadn't used hot water. The elders called for a gathering. It had been decades since the last. Jonas attended, though the seats were half empty. The hall of memory, once the heart of community, now echoed like a mausoleum. The speaker, a thin, stoop-shouldered man named Rev Talon, stood at the center. His voice, though old, cut through the silence like a blade. "We have pretended long enough," he said. "Whatever we try to contain has noticed us. It is not from the ash. It is not from the stars. It is older than both." Murmurs rippled. A few stood to leave. Rev Talon didn't stop them. "We called it down," he continued. "Not with rituals or signals, but with attention, curiosity, pattern. The more we mapped it, the closer it came. And now it is here." Jonas felt the room contract. "What is it?" someone asked. "A virus? A god?" Rev Talon didn't answer at first. Then, "It is a mirror we were not meant to look into." More silence. Then, from somewhere behind Jonas, a woman's voice. "Can it be stopped?" Rev Talon looked up, eyes glistening. "No, but perhaps it can be understood." That night, the dome sealed itself. Not manually, not under orders. Systems just stopped responding. Emergency exits refused to open. Comms went silent, but the glyphs kept spreading. Jonas stayed awake, like the others. No one could sleep now, not without dreaming of rooms without doors, skies without stars, and faces they didn't recognize, speaking in voices they'd never heard. He started sketching too, on walls, on his hands. He didn't know what they meant, but he felt better when they were drawn, as if they held back something. On the fourth day, a new figure appeared. Not walking this time. It was just there, in the center of the dome. No alarms, no sensors, just presence. This one was tall, smooth, no clothes, no features, just a body-shaped blur, like heat distortion forced into form. Everyone saw it. No one approached, until a child walked forward. Jonas didn't know her name. She couldn't have been older than 7. She stared at the figure without fear, and it bent down to her. Not menacingly, softly. The girl reached out, touched it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dome lit up, not with light, but memory. Every screen, every reflective surface, every latent neural feed burst to life, playing different moments from planets past. Wars, cities burning, oceans boiling, animals dying in droves, laughing, kissing, crying, building, praying. Humanity's archive. But it didn't stop there. The memories kept flowing, forward, into futures no one had lived yet. And all of it was wrong. Jonas dropped to his knees. His head swam. Everyone screamed. Then it stopped. The figure was gone. So was the child. But in her place, at the center of the dome, one final glyph had been burned into the floor. Not etched, not painted, burned. And beneath it, a word, translated somehow into every tongue. Return. Jonas didn't sleep that night either. He knew, now, what the thing at Block A7 had meant. They didn't summon it. They just found it. And it had been waiting for someone to remember. He sat by the mirror, watching as the condensation formed patterns he hadn't drawn. It was learning faster now, and it was still looking. Jonas could no longer tell how many days had passed. Time had lost its rhythm. Clocks worked, but they disagreed. His watch told him it was early morning, while the dome's central display flickered between noon and midnight. The sun, if it could still be called that, remained locked behind clouds that weren't clouds, more like folds in a dirty canvas sky. Even the air tasted different, as if the atmosphere had been rewritten with new rules. The figure hadn't returned. Neither had the girl, but something had stayed behind. People moved differently now, like actors who had forgotten their lines but were forced to keep performing. Most spoke only in fragments. Some didn't speak at all. They began building things. Strange, abstract structures in unused corners of the dome. Towers of glass, wire, and old data drives. Circles made of broken ration trays. No one explained them. They just built. Jonas didn't join them. He couldn't. Not yet. He spent his days observing, recording what he could. His tablet still worked, barely, and he filled it with notes, sketches, sounds. He stopped trying to make sense of them. Cataloging was a reflex, not a solution. Then Mara came back. She appeared outside his pod one morning, silent, thin, older somehow. Her uniform was torn at the sleeves, her boots stained with something black and dry. But her eyes were the same. "Where have you been?" he asked, once he convinced himself she wasn't a dream. "Outside," she said. "Further than I should have gone." "You saw it." She nodded. He stepped aside to let her in. They didn't speak for a while. Not because they had nothing to say, but because words no longer carried the right weight. Finally, Mara sat back against the wall and exhaled hard. "There are no edges anymore," she said. "Out there, it just keeps unfolding. Space, land, memory, it's all stitched together like bad code." Jonas frowned. "You mean it's spreading?" "No, I mean it was never separate. We just pretended we understood the borders. This thing didn't arrive, it revealed." He didn't ask how she knew. He felt it too. The certainty that what they called reality had always been a mask. Mara pulled a small device from her coat, a data crystal, flickering faintly. "I recorded something. Audio. From the deep zone." Jonas hesitated. "Is it safe?" She laughed once. "No." He played it anyway. The sound was not sound. It was structure. Shifting tones layered with whispers, and beneath it, a steady rhythm. Not quite a heartbeat. Not quite a language. But it said one thing, again and again, in every tone Jonas could register. "You are part of the echo." Jonas shut it off. His ears rang afterward, like he'd heard it in his bones. Mara stood, brushing dust from her knees. "I think it's trying to remember itself. And we're its mirror." He followed her gaze to the dome's core, where the glyph had been burned days ago. People still visited it. They knelt there. Sometimes they spoke in tongues. Other times, they wept or laughed uncontrollably. No one interfered. Jonas turned to her. "You think it's alive?" "I think it's older than the idea of alive." That night, Mara slept. The first person Jonas had seen sleep in over a week. She didn't wake. Not the next day. Not the day after. Her body remained warm, pulsed slow but steady, like hibernation. Her breathing was shallow, peaceful, but her eyes twitched constantly beneath the lids, faster than dreams should have allowed. Others began to fall asleep too, one by one, some in pairs, some alone. None of them woke, not even when prodded, not even when water was poured over them. But their vitals remained. It was as if they'd been paused. Jonas stayed awake. He wasn't sure why he hadn't succumbed. Maybe because he resisted the glyphs. Maybe because he hadn't tried to understand. He walked through the silent halls of the dome, past rows of sleeping bodies and half-built shrines, toward the control tower. No one stopped him. He found Rev Talon there, awake, eyes sunken but alert. "They're not gone," Talon said before Jonas could speak. "They're dreaming." "Of what?" "Of what it wants them to see. Of what they used to be." Jonas stepped closer. "You knew this would happen." "I suspected," Talon said. "The archive didn't just show us our past. It used it. It stitched memories into a pattern. It's teaching itself how to be us." "Why?" To become what comes after us," Rev Talon said. Jonas stood in silence, the weight of those words pressing into his chest like a slow suffocation. He looked out through the panoramic window of the control tower. Below, the dome shimmered with eerie calm. Bodies lay like seeds scattered across soil, dreaming, still waiting. The glyph in the center pulsed faintly, as though breathing. "You think it's evolving?" Jonas asked, voice brittle. Using us to shape itself? No, Talon replied, his gaze distant. It's not evolving. It's remembering. Jonas felt a heat behind his eyes, the kind that came before grief or revelation. Then what are we? The imprint, Talon said, the fossil in reverse. We are not the architects. We are the residue. Jonas stepped away from the window. The silence in the dome wasn't emptiness. It was anticipation, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to finish becoming. He didn't want to understand, but it was too late not to. Later that evening, he returned to Mara's side. Her breathing was unchanged. Her lips moved ever so slightly, but no sound emerged. He touched her hand. It twitched once, then stilled, on the wall beside her cot. Symbols had begun to form in the condensation. Not chaotic now, not random. They were sentences. We are almost whole. She is learning. You are the last. Jonas stepped back. He no longer feared the messages. He feared the moment they would stop. Something shifted in the dome 2 days later. A light appeared in the sky above the glyph, not descending, but blooming, silent, white, but not bright. It radiated no heat, no gravity, but everything in the dome turned toward it. Even those asleep stirred, lips mouthing forgotten prayers or unheard names. Jonas didn't approach it, not right away. He watched from the tower as the light spread outward in silent waves, touching the walls, the sleepers, the bones of the dome itself. And with each pulse, more of the world unraveled, not in destruction, in clarity. The dome began to vanish, not collapse, but become irrelevant, transparent, forgotten. What replaced it was not new. It had always been there, hidden behind the illusion of material. Mountains formed, but they moved like thoughts. Rivers of light flowed where roads used to be. Trees, impossibly tall and narrow, grew from memory alone. And in the middle, where the glyph burned, the figure returned. This time it had a face, not a human one, not exactly. But it echoed humanity, compassion shaped from memory, sorrow sculpted from loss. Its skin shimmered with embedded glyphs, and its eyes held a storm of every question ever asked. Jonas stepped forward alone. No voices guided him. No command towered above him. Just a figure, waiting. He didn't speak. He simply stood, heart pounding, and raised his hand. The figure did the same. When their palms met, he saw everything. Not like a vision, not metaphor, a total immersion. He was Mara, stumbling through the ash beyond Block A7, feeling the old world scream beneath her feet. He was a girl, touching the heat form, seeing every war, every hope, every failure in a heartbeat. He was a figure itself, lost and blind in the darkness of forgotten stars, awakening to the ache of memory called humanity. And then he saw what came after. Not extinction, not salvation. Return. Jonas fell to his knees, sobbing, not from fear, but from knowing he was not apart from it. That none of them had ever been. They were not the creators, not the chosen. They were the catalyst. When he awoke, he was no longer in the dome. He stood beneath a sky that had never known stars, beside water that reflected not light, but memory. The world around him thrummed, not with machines, but with recognition. The structures in the distance were not buildings. They were dreams given form. The air was thick with potential. The sleepers had joined him. One by one they stirred, rising slowly, their eyes wide not with confusion but clarity. Mara was beside him, tears running down her face. She didn't speak, but he felt her thoughts like a second heartbeat. The figure stood among them now, indistinguishable from the rest, no longer glowing, no longer alien, just part of the whole. No one gave orders. No one asked questions. Instead, they began to build, not with tools or code, but with intention. Ideas became bridges. Emotion formed the walls. Language folded into reality like the laws of physics had agreed to step aside. They weren't creating a new world. They were remembering the true shape of existence, lost beneath millennia of noise. Later, as the new sun rose, a soft pulse of color without fire, Jonas walked along a path that hadn't existed the day before. He found Talon seated on a ridge, staring into the distance. You were right, Jonas said. Talon smiled weakly. That's not comforting. You knew we were just the beginning. I only hope we'd be forgiven for forgetting. They sat in silence. Then Talon asked, Do you still hear it? Jonas closed his eyes. Beneath the rustle of the night wind, beneath the pulse of the living sky, he heard the rhythm return. Not words, not glyphs, just understanding. They had brought hell with them. Ruined planets, burned skies, machines that forgot their makers. They had written entropy into the stars. But this was worse. Because it was better. Because it had always been waiting. And because now it remembered their names.